Hello, I'm Julie Swenson, Managing Director of Forward Theater Company in Madison, Wisconsin.
And I'm Mike Fisher, Milwaukee-based theater writer and dramaturg.
I'm Jen Uphoff-Gray, founder and artistic director of Forward Theater Company, and this is Theater Forward, a twice-monthly conversation about theater from a local, regional, and national perspective. From Madison to Manhattan, we're excited to share insight into our own company while exploring issues surrounding theater in the Midwest and around the country. Welcome to episode 89 of Theater Forward.
Great. Good to be here.
For this episode, we are going to reflect back on 2022 in the world of theater, here and around the country, highlights, lowlights, all the things that we will remember most about this year. And to kick us off, this will be highly personal lists, I think. But Mike, why don't you get us started? What's something on your 2022 list?
Well, I have both a highlight and a lowlight in this category. It involves critics. The highlight for me is a person who I've called out previously on this podcast is, to me, maybe the best theater critic in America right now, and that's Helen Shaw, who has been further elevated. She's had a meteoric rise, and she's now the theater critic for New Yorker magazine, which means that a lot of people who were firewalled and didn't get to read her when she was at New York or didn't read her when she was at Time Out are now going to have an opportunity to see how smart she is. I don't want to wade into, in this celebratory podcast, into the whole K-pop controversy going on in New York right now involving critics. But if you want to read somebody who has something intelligent and measured and mixed and just good to say about that show, Helen Shaw's piece in The New Yorker would be a place to start. And then on the downside, sort of along the same lines, I'm very, very sad that we have lost Michael Feingold, who is one of the great throwback critics from another generation, in an era where I feel like way too many critics in this state and nationally are pulling their punches and not being truthful and also loving. Both of those things together, truthful, but also loving and engaged with the theater that they're supposed to be assessing. Michael was all of that. And he just pissed people off constantly because he was not afraid to say what he thought, but it was also clear he was approaching this as a fan. It's no accident that he was a literary manager and dramaturg, as well as being a critic and a fan. Those three go together for a lot of critics who are really into this for the right reasons. And Charles McNulty, another really great theater critic in America at the LA Times, who I've mentioned before, gave a beautiful shout out to him, which I highly recommend you read, in American Theater Magazine, which really, it was a mixed review, I think would be the right way to say it, of Feingold and his career. Just one quote from Michael Feingold. This is his review from, part of his review from Mike Nichols' Death of a Salesman revival. And this is Feingold to a T. Quote, "We own a tradition and we have the right to see it constantly living and made new." And that's him, somebody that revered the past and everything it could give us, but also recognized the importance of moving forward.
Mike, I'm going to jump in next just because also on my list is something that overlaps a little with what you were just talking about. And that is, again, something on both my highlight and low light of the year, is that we've seen some really exciting risk-taking in what's been happening on Broadway in a way that's really thrilling. And, you know, Audrine Kennedy had her Broadway debut last week with the opening of Ohio State Murders. I mean, that's incredible, long overdue. And I'm so glad it's happening while she is still with us, 91 and going strong. But other things too. Pictures from Home is in rehearsals right now, a script that we've loved, and they've got a dynamite cast. That is going to be something really to see, that play by Char White. What's been going hand in hand with some exciting risk taking on Broadway is it's really highlighting some of it's sort of stress testing the whole ecosystem around what shows get produced. And again, we could do a whole podcast and probably won't about some of the controversy happening around the closing of K-pop, the imminent closing of Ain't No Mo. But I think that some really pointed and important conversations about how Broadway is marketed and the ways in which it falls short in marketing shows with people of color in the focus of it. and marketing to those audiences that Broadway really, the marketing infrastructure does not serve that well. And again, some real questioning of, within the field of theater criticism, how do we diversify the voices so that plays by and about diverse characters are being reviewed? And it's not to say that white male critics shouldn't review these plays, but we should make sure that perspectives beyond those are also being elevated and out there, so that you get a robust and diversified perspective on these shows. And so I guess that's why it's on my high and low list of the year. It's thrilling that so many risks are being taken. I think that those risks are not being supported as well as they could be by all of the other pieces of the puzzle that make the commercial theater tick. And hopefully, as a field, as an industry, we're going to learn from these controversies and these conversations and be able to do better in the future.
Jumping onto that, Jen, two of my highlights happened in New York just this month. One of them, to both of your points, it walked the fine line of diversity and a well-established play, and that was Death of a Salesman. I came for Wendell Pierce, who I have loved since The Wire. I left with the greatest of admiration and respect, and Sharon D. Clarke's Linda Lohman was maybe the best I've ever seen. And I've seen a lot of Death of a Salesman, but it was grounded and it was true. And it wasn't a flighty woman in love with her husband because that's what housewives do. It was solid. And when she says respect must be paid, it rocked the house. And I will also say too, in terms of that audience, it was a beautiful mix of people, and that it was really gratifying to see how diverse that audience was. I came, however, to New York, or went to New York, to see Marie Kohler's Boswell. This is, there's been a lot of iterations of this. It started at Renaissance Theater Works as Boswell's Dreams, like 18 years ago. It went to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival in 2019, and it was performed at 59 East 59th. Written for Brian Monty to play Samuel Johnson. He has been the one constant throughout all of these performances. But boy, there was a mix of beautiful cast on a really small stage, directed by Laura Gordon. Jody Sekas did the scenic design with Tony Lyons building it, and it was exquisite and fun, and it's so good to see good friends succeed that way.
Yeah,
that's my best. I'll come up with. I have other things that aren't so great, but those are the great things.
Well, I'll stay with you, Julie, on things that were so great in terms of theater closer to home. Some of the performances that stood out for me, just in Wisconsin, I'll start with that. In 2022, 3 performances. I saw everything but one show at American Players Theater. I did not get to see The Rivals because the performance I was supposed to attend was canceled for COVID, and I couldn't make it up. But I saw the other 8. 3 really stood out for me, and they are both, to Jen's point, one's very formally innovative. One is a sort of veritable chestnut. And 2 of them are sort of chestnuts, and that's Stones in His Pockets with Marcus Trzynski and Nate Berger just killing it, playing so many people I can't even keep count of it all. Just a revelation of a raisin in the sun. I mean, I will be honest. I went to see that not only out of more of a sense of duty than anything else, to APT and to Hansberry, because I've seen that show so many times. And like some Shakespeare plays, you feel like you want to give it a break. But boy, was I not anticipating what I was going to get, particularly from Deanna Reed Foster in the role of the matriarch, who just a Chicago-based actor, one of the many that American Players Theater is doing a very good job of bringing in over the last decade and exposing Wisconsin audiences to just how great she is. And it turned the play from a play about Walter into a play about the women. And it just completely, shifted the focus. And then finally, the Moors. With a cast of APT, and mostly APT ensemble members just doing what they do best and having fun in the Touchstone in a way that they don't get to do elsewhere. And then in Milwaukee, the two best shows I saw this year for me, both came from the same theater, and that's Milwaukee Chamber Theater, both directed by Brent Hazelton. And that is Indecent in the spring, and just a killer of, pun intended, of a performance of Misery, starring Kelly Doherty and Jonathan Wainwright, that just left me. It was the 100 fastest and most awful minutes of my entire theater life in 2022. I couldn't wait to get out of there because it was so claustrophobic, but I was on the edge of my seat. And it featured just a world-class design team with special mentions for Josh Schmidt, Wisconsin-based, and for Noel Stolmack. You know, both of these nationally recognized designers. Noel, of course, a member of the Forward Advisory Company. I'm so proud that she's one of my fellow advisory company members every time I watch her lighting design, and I love Josh's sound design. So those were real standouts for me in 2022.
A little, unless Jen, you have more shows. I've been thinking about this a lot, and we talk about the death of theater. And Stephen Dietz has that incredible article about. He's saying it's going to die, it's going to die, it's going to die, and it lives. So I think it's alive. It will always be alive. I'm not concerned about that. What I am concerned about is the dearth of backstage work crew, of technical directors, of carpenters. Those are positions that are not being trained right now in our colleges, and we are not seeing people come out of these programs wanting to do that work. And that's a real concern. I think everybody is, I would say, I'll just take it from Wisconsin. There's a sharing of the few individuals that are around. And I would love to go into theater programs around this country and say, performing is great, so great. And, and you'll love doing it when you can, while you can. But boy, if you want to make a career in this, think about picking up, a hammer, get into technical direction. And I think people will have a very long and fulfilling career.
Yeah. I think what I would bring up next, again, it kind of marries something that's been a highlight for me of the year with something that is not so much. And that is building on what you're saying, the theater is dead, long live the theater. Yeah.
Right.
And where we are as a field in terms of developing new work. Right. And there's a lot to be concerned about. So many of the new play supporting programs that have ended or paused over the last year or two. You look at the loss of Humana Festival, the Lark in New York, et cetera. A lot of concerns about lower ticket sales as we are still in the pandemic. It's not, done with us yet. A lot of worries that you need to only program chestnuts, that you need to do plays with title recognition, all of that. So those are all huge causes for concern. And ticket buyers are down. I mean, we've seen it here and we hear it from our peers. Single ticket buyers are starting to come back, but everybody's down in subscribers. It's going to be years to build back for most of us to pre-pandemic levels. So that's all very worrisome. At the same time, there are so many causes for hope and optimism, right? You look at the TCG list of the most produced playwrights in America, and tied at the top of the list are Lynn Nottage and Lauren Gunderson, right? That's a pretty good sign right there. I will also say, I'm very proud of all of the shows that we did here at Forward over the course of 2022. All of them were fairly new plays. One was a world premiere, and the rest we were pretty early productions of. The two riskiest plays were our best sellers. That's really encouraging. It's very exciting to see that when we go more out on a limb, we pick these plays that were challenging. I mean, they had a lot to reward the audience with, but if you look at them on paper, they were very risky, and those did the best in terms of ticket sales. And so that's something that I look back at. It's not even so much looking back at it with pleasure as more reminding myself of that as we go into the future and make decisions that with risk comes reward if you're lucky.
Yeah, I mean, one of those, I'm assuming this is what you're talking about. And I deliberately, when I give these, and I guess I'm going to do a little shouting out to Forward now, which I try not to do in this year-end thing we do every year. I deliberately exclude Forward plays when I give best of lists because there's a conflict of interest. But having said that, my favorite play anywhere in Wisconsin this year was Russian Troll Farm, which was produced by Forward and which was a huge, world premiere, risk-taking play of a short that just was wonderful. Just as the play I'm most looking forward to right now in the spring of 2023 is our production of Airness, which will probably get to talk about sometime in the future. And again, a play that has gotten more circulation, but it's a new play. It's not a play that's been produced professionally in Wisconsin. In both of those instances, you're seeing here, as you're seeing in other theaters in Wisconsin as well, theater companies who, despite the headwinds Jen's referring to, are willing to take chances. And with that in mind, just a few more shout outs outside of Wisconsin to bests of this year. All of these were very risky in different ways. In Chicago, A Fiddler on the Roof by Barry Kosky, who's an opera director mostly, that has raised enormous controversy. People either loved it or hated it. But the reason that it got so much attention is because it was so different from any fiddler anybody has ever seen in ways that I could fill 3 podcasts with, but won't do that here today. Also, Doug Wright's Goodnight Oscar, which is now slated for a Broadway opening in the spring after having had a very, very successful run at Goodman Theater, a play that took chances with taking on the whole issue of political correctness, much in some of the same ways that the movie Tar did. I'm sort of saying we need to think about, cancel culture and political correctness in more sophisticated ways, and rather than in the binary, it's all good or all bad ways that we've been thinking about them. And it was a gutsy play for that reason. And finally, Steppenwolf's production by Steppenwolf ensemble member Terrell Alvin McCraney of Choir Boy. A very sort of quote unquote avant-garde play. Yes, it's been done in New York. Chicago doesn't always get to do all the best, most innovative plays first, just usually. And it was a fantastic production, raising all kinds of difficult issues of the way McCraney always does about what it means to be Black in America, about what it means to be gay and Black in America, about toxic masculinity in American culture, and done in a way that was just beautifully rendered and really made you think as you left the theater. Those plays made me excited, as did all the other ones I've called out so far.
It's fascinating that we've come out of this pandemic, and like you said, Jen, we're not completely out, but hopefully we're seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. And instead of people going back to two-handers and really focusing on the plays that they think their audience will love and that have heard of, I feel like most companies were taking bigger chances this year. And you disagree? I'm seeing your face.
I just made a little face. I think
there was a lot. Yeah, I just think there was more chances than there were that I saw in like the 2009, where it felt like this entire state hunkered down and a 3-person cast became a very big cast. And I didn't see that this time. That's not what was happening in 2020.
Yeah. No, I think my not sure about that face is that I think we tend to follow and pay attention to the companies that do the work that excites us.
That could be.
And I do think there's a lot of companies that did hunker down and do small and known crowd pleasing plays. And I get it, right? Like, do you have the resources to take risks in such a risky time, right? So
rewarded right here on this podcast, being rewarded for their choice, to take chances.
Yeah.
Yes, go on.
But yes, I think that there were plenty of companies that by choice or by necessity, really did play it safe this year. And I can't blame them for doing so. But I think a highlight is seeing, and I think your point comparing it to the way folks, made decisions in the wake of the financial crisis of 2008, 2009 is maybe illustrative, because a lot of the folks who are making decisions in this particular crisis were also making decisions, or at least in the room with the decision makers during the last one. So there was perhaps a bit of learning from that, and learning that sometimes you actually have to go big to get yourself out of a hole, right? That little incremental steps aren't going to save us. Yeah. I think continuing my trend of sort of pairing something that was really so great and that I valued so highly about the year with something that I was sad or disappointed about. One of the highlights for me of this year has continued to be these conversations with my peers around the country as facilitated by Theater Communications Group. There have been several different groups that I've been able to be a part of, and these have been phenomenally valuable conversations, learning spaces, sympathy spaces. One of the conversations I do get to do every 2 weeks is to talk to other artistic directors around the country of theaters that are in roughly the same annual budget size as mine. I'm also on a group of folks with the same kinds of contracts that we have with the Actors Union to talk about issues that we're having there. And just being connected with, hearing from, learning from, being empathetic with colleagues who are doing the same things that we're doing, or at least are facing the same headwinds, to use your word, Julie, that we are, has been an enormous value add to my year. I've learned so much. It's been very reassuring. You go, oh, our subscribers are down more than we expected. Then you hear, oh, no, everybody's are, right? Then you can stop beating yourself up that you've done something wrong, and more like, this is the world that we're in right now, that sort of thing. So that's been an enormous gift during the year. One of the things that I will say has been tremendous during 2022 for me, but that I'm very worried about as we go into the new year is, and I've talked about it before, but my theater Twitter community, the theater artists and thinkers who I follow on Twitter, from whom I learn so much, from whom I hear examples of brilliant things and brilliant thinking happening all over the country, diverse viewpoints, innovative ways of doing things. Great dialogue about the issues that we're all facing. That has been one of the greatest reasons why I have been on Twitter is all of this community and education that I've had access to. Obviously, that is rapidly going away, and we do not need to talk more about the
pay your $8
dumpster fire. The dumpster
Mike,
fire.
they got rid of that.
Yeah, that is Twitter. But it's an enormous loss to the field. It is truly an enormous loss to the field, and I have no doubts that at some point in the future there will become a gathering space that people will find each other on again. But that is not going to happen quickly. So for the intervening probably years before we really find ourselves en masse in a communal space, we have lost something that is of tremendous value, not just to me, but to the entire field. And that is I'm really depressed about it.
Another quick aside, and this is a positive and a negative on Twitter, which for me to be positive about it all is, of course, a struggle. But Jenny Odell who wrote How to Do Nothing, really, really great book about the way in which we pay attention and don't, and what social media does to that, had a fantastic column in yesterday's. So for those listening, December 11th, 2022, New York Times Sunday in Review, about the ways in which social media needs to be used more purposefully. It's not a Luddite column. She's not saying Twitter's bad. She's just saying she wants people to use Twitter the way Jen uses Twitter. And in a more targeted and focused way. A positive and negative for me, I mean, I'll go with Jen's dialectical approach to this because I think it's good. is some of the people who have left us or who are leaving us, and some of whom you want to celebrate for just the amazing things that they did. And in terms of artistic directors in Chicago, this has been a cataclysmic year in terms of shifting. And three that I want to call, well, really four, counting one of them's an in tandem pairing. But we're losing Bob Falls at Goodman Theater, who did so much to turn that into the world-class institution it is. Barbara Gaines, the founding artistic director at Chicago Shakespeare Theater, is leaving us, ditto. And then also, maybe less known to some of our theater audiences, but certainly known to anybody who's a musical theater geek, Terry James, managing director, and Aaron Teal, an artistic director at Marriott Theater, also announced their retirement. So, we'll see what the future holds. Goodman's already named a successor, Susan Booth, who was sort of the artistic director in training for that job anyway, even when she was away in Atlanta, and is now being brought back to Chicago. Very excited about that. The other, we'll see where we go. But then also I want to call out one actual, there'll be plenty of praise given, in year-end retrospectives to Sidney Poitier and Angela Lansbury. We don't need to go through that here on this more localized podcast, but I do want to give a special shout out to Hollis Resnick, one of the great actors of her generation. Did Wounded Souls better than anybody I can think of that I've seen on a stage in Chicago. Truly somebody who was not only a fantastic actor and who we got to see plenty of in Wisconsin as well, but also had a fantastic voice, and she will be dearly, dearly missed. We lost her in April.
Yeah, brilliant artist. Thanks for that, Mike. Julie, anything else you want to add from your list?
I think, if we're saying thank you and goodbye for a really wonderful career closer to home is David Cesarini at Next Act Theater. I think he was a founder of Next Act with, was a combined theater with Next Generation and Tesseract. And what we sometimes lose sight of, and I agree, Mike, that Bob Falls had an incredible career, but Bob Falls couldn't have had an incredible career without all of the people that were supporting him to have a great career.
Co-sign, yep.
And the staff and the stage managers and the director of marketing. He could not have done it without all these people. And I think sometimes the end of the year celebrations of these people's incredible careers don't always celebrate the people by whom they were successful. And there's an awful lot of really wonderful people. I think of Michael Wright, Jessica Connolly. We're all at Next Act for a long time and part of David's success.
Well, and just really quickly, Julie, along the same lines, another Wisconsinite who has left us, and this will be near and dear to your heart as a managing director. But, for all the success that is rightly attributed to Brenda DeVita and David Frank before her at APT, Carrie Van Hallgren was the managing director there for 8 years, is now going to be the assistant dean to the humanities division at UW-Platteville, her hometown. So, bittersweet for her and for us, but I will miss her. I will miss her, just her dedication. I will also miss her just basic decency as a human being. And during some very, very difficult moments at APT, for me in particular, in terms of my relationship with them in the past, Carrie was the person that stepped up continually with respect. And with a willingness to see things from an alternative points of view, above and beyond her own. And I will never forget that.
Yeah, she's the best. Really.
We will miss her.
Yeah, miss her as a colleague, but glad she's sticking around the state in the arts at least.
Right.
I've got one more pairing of something I really found a highlight of the year and a low light. Worth mentioning. I'll save the highlight for last, so we can end on a better note, at least from my list. But for the low light, and we saw this coming, but the complete lack of government support for the arts this year. Again, we knew it was coming. Nobody expected that the the significant amount of financial support that was given to arts organizations during the height of the pandemic was going to continue at that level. But the fact that the money basically just completely disappeared when our challenges have only begun was disappointing. Not surprising, but disappointing. All of that federal money gone. I mean, there's still NEA grants, but that's, a fraction of a percent, only helps a very, very small number of organizations. That's about it at the federal level. Wisconsin continues. I think we might have moved up to 48th in the country from 49 in terms of our funding. I may be wrong.
All right.
I may be wrong, but it is horrifyingly small. And to add truly insult to injury, even the minimal funding that was coming from the state arts board through no fault of the arts board came almost a year late to all of our organizations because the committee that needed to approve the money that was already budgeted refused to put it on the agenda for month after month after month. And that money came very, very, very late to organizations. Some of those organizations, that money was a lifeline, and that they had to wait so long to get those funds that had already been allocated by the state because a committee didn't prioritize the 3 minutes to check off the box was insulting, in addition to being painful for a lot of organizations. And, at the local county and city level, there's almost no money. And what little bit of money there is, because it's, governmentally based, the process for applying for it is so burdensome that I think in some ways it's more penalizing to arts organizations to even apply for the money than it's worth, because you spend so many hours to do the application, to do all the reporting, and the money that they have to give out is now so minuscule that I think for a lot of organizations it costs you to apply for those funds. And so from the federal level right down, all the way down, it is it's depressing. And if I can get on my soapbox for a moment, it's a little infuriating, because it's not just, oh, we need it. It's not just, oh, the arts are important. We're also an enormous economic driver for our communities. And the money that gets invested by the government in arts organizations pays back manifold to our communities. And so the short-sightedness and lack of respect for the field really, it gripes me.
I'm with you. Yes.
But for a high note, and this reflects back on the most recent episode of the podcast. This has been a year where at many theaters and arts organizations around the country, we've seen a heightened emphasis on accessibility. And I mean accessibility for folks with all kinds of physical needs or other kinds of needs that theaters can make efforts to meet, and to be a welcoming space for all. I'm seeing that all over the place. I know that has been a major area of growth for us here. This was the first year, 2022, when every single one of our main stage productions had an ASL interpreted performance. That's something that is really exciting to me. And I think that's something I will remember about this year, and I'm excited to build on in the future.
Continuing with the same sort of upbeat approach. And Jen, I'm glad that you sort of turned it around, so I didn't have to follow your very correct and very upsetting diagnosis of the way in which the arts are funded in America. It's truly depressing. I'll end with, this is cheating only a little. I'm going to suggest 3 stocking stuffers. 2 of them refer to things in early 2023, but hey, they were announced in 2022. The first one, though, is the best new theater book that I read in 2022, and it's John Lahr's Arthur Miller biography. It's relatively short. John Lahr, great theater critic forever, mostly with the New Yorker, also somebody that's written so many good books. His biography of Tennessee Williams, I'm on record in my review as saying one of the best and most extraordinary biographies I've ever read in any field. Sarah Ruhl says no one writes about playwrights and theater history the way John Lahr does. And this new book on Miller is just terrific. It's not just a sort of slog through, from cradle to grave biography. He takes particular themes that were important in Miller as a person and in his work, and uses those to sort of plumb the depths of what he is all about. And it's relatively short, unlike the Williams biography, which was a doorstopper. This one clocks in at under 300 pages. That would be a great stocking stuffer. Two more above and beyond. Again, I'm trying to leave forward to the side. Above and beyond. Of course, you should all, if you're within viewing distance or driving distance, get a ticket to Airness. It is going to be unlike anything you've ever seen on a Forward Theater stage. It's about an air guitar competition directed by the great Molly Rohde. That'll be our first production in 2023. Two more stocking stuffer ideas, one in Chicago, one in Milwaukee. In Milwaukee, a really star-studded production of the great Edward Albee's Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, with actors including three Wisconsin legends, or two legends and one legend in the making, I should say. The legends being Laura Gordon and Jim Ridge, and then Casey Hoekstra, rightly a favorite in Wisconsin, is also going to be in that cast. And then in Chicago, those of you that read the columns I wrote for Forward during the pandemic will remember me frequently praising Emma Rice, a British-based director and artistic director. She did a fantastic show on the Chagall marriage, which I just wish somebody would do in the United States, called Flying Lovers of Vitebsk. Her show, Wuthering Heights, is coming to the Chicago Shakespeare Theater. The dates on that are January 27th to February 19th. It is a fantastic, you don't have to love Bronte or love Wuthering Heights, although if you don't, there's something wrong with you. But if you don't, you'll still love this show. It's a terrific show. And then the dates on the Virginia Woolf are January 20th to February 12th. So if you want a good stocking stuffer idea, those are three.
Love it. But Mike, I have to correct you. You don't have to be within driving distance of Madison to see Forward Theater shows this spring, because we will be doing filmed digital versions as well. I would not be doing
closed
my job.
Captioning.
Yeah.
If we're finishing, and with your accessibility theme, things to celebrate in 2022, I can't think of, there's probably a few, but the idea of a theater company which has consistently, from the start of the pandemic, made its shows accessible to audiences anywhere in the world online, with the expenses involved in that, which we have talked about in prior productions. That is huge. It's a huge time-consuming issue for people like Scott Hayden, sitting here producing this podcast. It's a huge issue for our, in terms of bringing in the extra cameras. It's a huge issue in terms of getting this out there. It's a huge issue in terms of closed captioning it. It's something that we have made a commitment to, and I am so proud in terms of our accessibility initiatives that this has been one of them. So yes, you can virtually watch people virtually play the guitar in 2023.
Yeah, it's
more
great.
Fun to experience it with others, but if you can't make it to the theater, all right.
I love it. Well, I always love talking with all of you about the ups and downs of this wild business, and it is always a highlight of my year doing this podcast with all of you. And I think we will say that is it for this episode of Theater Forward, a conversation about theater in Wisconsin, the Midwest, and America. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Jenna Poff-Gray.
I'm Julie Swenson.
And I'm Mike Fisher. Our podcast is produced by the amazing Scott Hayden. And you can follow us or share your thoughts on Facebook and Twitter. That's at Theater Forward, as always, in 2022, in 2023, from now until the end of time, with an ER.
And if you enjoy this podcast, don't forget to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you might tune in. And be sure to leave a comment. We would love to hear from you.
We're so grateful to have you listening, and we will be back soon for another Theater Forward conversation.